So let's begin by davening that the zchut of our learning should help to finally bring home all of the hostages and protect our soldiers and the Am Yisrael, all of the innocent, and bring a speedy end to our wars. Be neshama for my mother, Shalom Aleichem Bas Menachem Mendel v'Rachel.
Amen.
So I pointed in the when I sent out the last email with the sheets, I pointed to this sugya Sanhedrin. So we're just going to do a little bit of this sugya because our sugya in Yoma is is borrowing from this sugya here. I wanted you to see it in context. So, especially because you have a small screen, I'll make this bigger. Okay. So why don't you read the beginning of the Mishnah here?
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Trying to get this going here. Okay. Matnitin. Nitkaven laharog et abehema laharog et adam. Adam lenachrei laharag et Yisrael lin falim laharag et ben kema patur.
Okay. So let me help you with that a little bit.
Oh, hold on. It's working. Hold on. Let me see if it's easier for me.
Hold on.
Hold on. Let's see. Let's see. All right. In the meantime, it says it's connecting, but
Give it a second because Michael Werner is
okay.
supposed to be coming in.
Oh, there we go. All right.
What happened to Michael? He asked to come in.
Okay, there we go.
What happened? Okay. Now I see both of you.
Yeah, I'll leave. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Now we're back to
That's
us.
better. I can see much better.
Okay. I didn't know Michael asked to come in and I admitted him. Then he disappeared. Just see something. Hold on. Well, I don't know what to do. Okay, let's continue and not catch up. So, okay, so let me help you read this a little bit more. You read it like this: Nitkaven laharog et behema, v'harag et adam.
Okay.
Comma.
Yeah, I see.
Lanach.
Okay.
Okay, lanachri v'harag et Yisrael. Lanifalim v'harag et ben kayama. Patur. Okay, so these are various cases dealing with killing. So what's the first case? Nitkaven laharog et behema v'harag et adam. What's that case?
So if one intends to kill an animal and kills a person instead,
Okay, so what does that mean? Like, how do you imagine that scenario?
so one is, I don't know if it's a case of maybe one's being attacked by an ox, maybe, and want to kill the ox, so you throw something at it, and instead you kill the person, you miss, you kill the person, or another scenario where you're just trying to kill that animal and miss and kill the person instead.
Yeah, let's go with the second one. In other words,
Okay.
all of these cases are cases where the assumption is that these are cases where someone has intention to kill. They're intending to kill X, but they end up killing Y. So in the first case, נתכוון להרוג את הבהמה והרג את האדם. So let's say, nowadays, back then they're talking about with an arrow or maybe with a rock or something like that. We could say with a rifle, the guy has a rifle and he's aiming for an animal, but either his aim is off or the animal moves and there was a person behind him, something like that. He ends up killing a person. Or Lenachri, he aims to kill a non-Jew, but he ended up killing a Jew. But Nephilim, do you know what Nephil is?
Isn't that somebody is dying, is not going to live?
No, that's it's the other end of the spectrum, kind of.
Like a fetus that's not going to live.
Yeah, so it's a baby that was born that we're not sure if it's going to live. So there's a notion that even any child that's born is not necessarily considered to be a ben kayama. In other words, oh, okay, Michael's not coming. Okay. Um, a, that a child that's born is not necessarily considered to be a ben kayama unless it's lived for 30 days. Like certainly if it was an early birth, let's say a woman gives birth in 7 months. So the child that's born is a nefel. So we don't know if it's going to actually survive or not. So it falls into a certain category for certain halachic purposes. So if he had intention to kill Nefalim, but he ended up killing a Ben Kayama, a full-fledged person, a person who's living, and there's no reason for us to believe that the person is not going to survive otherwise. That kills them. So in all of these cases, patur. So let's understand first of all, patur from what?
Would it be patur from punishment?
He would be patur from capital punishment for murder. Okay, it doesn't mean that certainly in none of these cases is this permissible. There's no case where you kill somebody where it's permissible. Not in these kinds of circumstances, but he would be patur from capital punishment specifically for murder. So here we'll see. Rashi explains. "Nitkaven laharog et behema, haya omeid adam etzel behema." It's a person standing next to an animal. "Nitkaven laharog behema," and he had intent to kill the animal. "V'harag adam," but something went wrong. I'm adding it, and he ended up killing a person. But his specific intent was not to kill the person; it was to kill the animal. So he's patur. Why? Mishum dechi'achu be atrat safeku. Because when the witness, in other words, we have to also step back and remind ourselves that in order for someone to be chayav capital punishment, to actually be brought to Beit Din and ultimately given a verdict of capital punishment, he would have had to have been warned by two witnesses, two qualified witnesses, just before he committed the act, and they would have to tell him, if you kill this person in front of you, that you will be chayav mita, right? You'll be liable to capital punishment. They have to say the kind of punishment he would get. It's a very specific warning. But here, if they were to have warned him, hatrat safeku, it wouldn't be the warning he would get would be a warning that would be in doubt. Afal pi shekibel lav hatra, even if he accepted their hatra. In other words, the person has to hear the hatra saying, we're warning you that if you commit this act, you'll be chayav X. And the person says, Afal pichein, I heard your warning, and nonetheless, I'm going to do it. It's a very specific set of actions. So even if this person got a warning, and the person said, I heard your warning, Shomer lahem yodeani shehu ben brit, v'amanat kein ani oseh, I know that the person that I'm going to kill is a ben brit. In other words, he's a Jew.
Did you?
And afal pichein, right? I'm still going to kill him. Amanat kein ani oseh. Dafka, because of that, I'm going to kill him. Shima hargenu amanat kein, that if I kill him, aniat chayev mita, patur, d'shema lo yahargen. He'll still be exempt because he may not kill him. So actually, to understand this Rashi a little
Yeah.
bit better, we'd have to do more of the sugya. So let's just take that at face value for the moment,
Okay.
okay, and leave it, because mainly what we want to do, we want to understand we have these three cases. Someone who intended to kill an animal but killed a person, and the person we're talking about is a Jew. If he intended to kill a non-Jew and he killed a Jew, he would also be patur. If he intended to kill Nephalim but killed a Ben Kayam, he's also patur. So also, Paul's not here, but this is the kind of question that Paul would always ask. So
Mhm.
but just for our own edification, I do want to clarify something about killing Jews and killing non-Jews. So certainly, if you kill a Jew, you're chayav mita. If you kill a non-Jew, it gets very complicated. Uh, but oh, second. Let's look at the Rambam here for a minute. So this is the very first halacha in the Rambam Hilchot Rotzeach U'Shmirat Nefesh, and he says, "Kol horeg nefesh adam mi Yisrael over below ta'aseh, shenemar lo tirtzach." Right? If you kill any person from the Jewish people, from Israel, then you violated a negative commandment, as it says, "You shall not murder." V'im ratzach bizadon bifnei edim. If you killed somebody on purpose in front of witnesses, mitato b'sayif, then he is put to death by the sword. Shneimar nakom yinakem. Mipmi hashmuel lamdu shezu mitat sayif. We we learn through tradition that that's referring to death by sword. בין שהרג את חברו בברזל, בין ששרפו באש, מיתתו בסייף. Doesn't matter how he killed the other person, whether he killed him with iron, like with a sword, or if he burnt him with fire, whatever it is, his mitah is besayif. So so what it means is, in order to be over on this specific isur of killing, you need to kill a Jew. If you don't kill a Jew, you may not be over on this specific Aveira, but it doesn't mean that you're allowed to kill non-Jews. And then it depends on the kind of non-Jew. There's not going to be a heter to kill non-Jews, and in fact, you may be over on other things, depending on the circumstance. Um, where was I looking? This is where the Rambam talks about our case. All right, let's leave it at that. Let's leave it at that for now. So I don't want people to think that in any way the Torah allows you to kill non-Jews. You're not allowed to kill non-Jews, right? In a war, you're allowed to, or for self-defense, you're allowed to. But those would be true of Jews as well. But it just means that the way the Rambam understands, and we see this based, just from our Mishnah, that the Mishnah seems to understand in a similar way, that you're not going to be over on Lo Tirtzach per se unless you kill a Jew. All right, so that's just point of uh, clarity to give us some clarification. I'm going to skip the rest of the Mishnah. We're going to go to the Gemara, or I'll go to the end of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah goes through other cases. Um, the other cases that the Mishnah talks about, um, they're all variations on this question of intent. So we'll just skim through some of them, right? So that if he had intent to hit him on the loins, but whatever he was going to hit him with wasn't really enough to kill him that way. But it went, like, say he was shooting an arrow. He was going to shoot it at his thigh, but the arrow went and hit him in the heart, and ended up going to his heart, and that was enough to kill him, and he died. He would be patur because again, it didn't fulfill his intent. And then it goes in other variations of what about the other way? Or he's heading for an adult, and it wasn't, he was aiming for an adult. Let's say he was throwing a rocket at an adult. It wasn't really enough to kill the adult, but it ended up going on a child and killed the child. It wasn't enough to kill the child. He would be patur. So I'm going to skip through these. Like, these are all variations on that. Then we get down to the end. We have Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon Omer, go ahead, you can read.
Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilo nitkaven laharog et zeh v'harag et zeh patur.
So what does that mean?
So Rabbi Shimon says that even if he intended to kill this one and he killed another, he's patur.
So what does that mean? What do you think that means?
It sounds like the beginning of the Mishnah. Maybe it's referring specifically to uh, when one Jew, he wanted to kill one Jew and he killed the other Jew.
Oh, in other words,
Another Jew.
right. So what we saw from the first part of the Mishnah is the category of person changed, right? Right? So he had intention to kill a Jew, but he killed a non-Jew. Uh, he had intent to kill a non-Jew, but and so forth. What if so? Rabbi Shimon says if he had intent to kill a Jew and he killed another Jew, he would be patur. Mashma that according to the Tanakama, that he would be chayav. Uh, let's see. The Gemara talks about this. So the first part of the Gemara we can kind of skip because the very beginning, the Gemara wants to know which part of the Mishnah Rabbi Shimon is referring to, because he comes all the way at the end. But he is, in fact, the Gemara concludes that he is, in fact, referring to the Reisha of the Mishnah. Hold on a second. Right. So this is the Mishnah again. This is just in a different page. It's just the Mishnah. So again, let's remind ourselves. So if he had intent to kill an animal and he killed a person, meaning a Jew, or if he had intent to kill a non-Jew and he killed a Jew, or Nifalim and he killed a Ben Kayama, in all those cases he's patur. But that implies that if he had intent to kill a Jew and he killed a different Jew, that he would be chayav. And Rabbi Shimon is poter. Rabbi Shimon says no. Even if he had intent to kill one Jew and he killed another Jew, he's patur. This is the Bartanura on that part of the Mishnah, right? Lava Sefer Demilta de Tanakama K'nai. It's not talking about the last thing in the Mishnah. Hadagar Tanakama Kavein Lakot the Gadol, etc., etc. Elo Rabbi Shimon Areisha Kai. Rabbi Shimon is talking about the Reisha of the Mishnah. Nitkaven Larog et Behema v'Harag et Adam Patur. Nitkaven Larog et Adam v'Harag Adam Acher Chayav. In other words, that's the diuk we would get from the Tanakama. So in other words, why was he patur when he had kavana to kill a behema, but he ended up killing a person? Because that was completely outside of his intent. But if his intent was to kill a Jewish person and he killed a different Jewish person, then the implication from the Tanakhama is he would be chayav. The Allah Kamar Rabbi Shimon, so on that Rabbi Shimon says, no, afilu nitkaven larog et zeh, v'harag et zeh, patur. Just like you said, even if he had intent to kill this Jew and he killed a different Jew, he would still be patur. This is actually a big machloket. Rambam holds halachas like Rabbi Shimon. I think most of the Rishonim hold like the Tanakama, but we don't have to get into that. Just so you know. Okay, so now we're back in this sugya on the Gemara here. El Aresha Nitkavent. El Aresha. Right? Rabbi Shimon is talking about the Resha. So we've explained that. That what? Nitkaven laroget beba, v'haraget adam, v'nachri v'haraget Yisrael, v'nfanim v'haraget ben kayam. Patur. Nitkaven laroget zeh, v'haraget zeh chayav. Implying that if he had intent to kill this Jew and he killed another Jew, he's chayav. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu nitkaven laroget zeh, v'haraget zeh patur. Okay. So now let's continue a little bit in the sugya. So you can read. I apologize I didn't do these into sheets because it would be easier, but it'll be good practice. Shita.
V'shita, Kai Ruvain v'Shimon v'Amar Anali Ruvan Ka Mikavna l'Shimon Loka Mikvana Hainu Peluktehu Amar Lachad Menehu Mai Nami Kasavar Ruven V'Nipsa Shimon Mai Tashma Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Ad Shemar Lin Floni Ani Mi Floni Ani Mi Only Floni Ani Mi Chaven.
Okay, first of all, I want to compliment you because you already stopped yourself and you saw the Tashma.
Tashma, yeah.
So you knew that was the beginning of another sentence. No,
yes.
But that's good. In other words, as you're pushing your way through reading the Gemara, that these phrases function like punctuation. So you know that the mai is the end of something. Now here I'm going to start off though. Until now we've had this term pshita as a kasha, right? Where the Gemara said something, and then after that the Gemara says pshita. What you're saying is obvious.
It's obvious.
Okay. Here pshita also means, in a sense, obvious, or something that that's clear that we could take for granted, but it's not asking it as a kasha. It's setting this up as a basis for discussion, as we'll see. So pshita, it's obvious. In other words, we want to discuss Rabbi Shimon and the Tanakama. So the Gemara says pshita kai Ruvain v'Shimon. It's obvious that if Ruvain and Shimon were standing, the Amar ana l'Ruvain kam b'kavna. So what does it mean? We have, let's say, Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Levi is the guy who's trying to kill somebody.
Oh, okay.
All right, and standing in front of him is Ruvain and Shimon, and he says, "Ana l'Ruvain kam b'kavna, l'Shimon lo kam b'kavna." I'm intending to kill Ruvain, and I don't intend to kill Shimon. But then what? when he shoots his shot, he ends up killing Shimon. So what would be the din? The Gemara says, Hainu pluktayu. So that, in other words, that case is the embodiment of the machloket between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon. That's exactly their machloket. That you have two Jews, Reuven and Shimon, and Plonier, Levi says, I want to kill Reuven, and I Dafka don't want to kill Shimon, but he ends up killing Shimon. So Tanakama is going to say he's chayav because you still had intent to kill a Jew. Rabbi Shimon will say no because your specific intent was not to kill the one that you killed. So that case embodies their machloket. So that's the pshita. In other words, pshita just means it's obvious that this case is something that we know the halachic outcome that Rabbi Shimon is going to say patur and that the Chachamim will say chayav. Amar, but now let's give a variation on that case. Amar lechad minayu. My, what if he said, I want to kill one of them?
One of them.
And as Rashi says, Amar lechad minayu kamikavna. I'm intending to kill one of them. I don't care which one, but I want to kill either Reuven or Shimon. So then what would be the din? How would everybody hold? Inami, or let's say another case, Kesavur Reuven v'nimtza Shimon. In other words, he says, I want to kill Reuven, and Reuven and Shimon are standing in front of him, and he kills Shimon because he thought Shimon was Reuven. So what would be the din then? In other words, right? So what would be the case? What would be the halachic outcome? Tashma. So we bring up. Now we're going to learn from here. Come and learn from this brayta. Titanya Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ad Shiomar Lifloni Ani Mitkaven. He's not chayav until he says, I intend to kill so and so.
Specifically.
Specifically. Okay. So now I want you to read a little bit more. This is now getting to the main thing I wanted to get to today. My tama.
My tama. The Rabbi Shimon Amar Kara Ba'arev Lo Vakam Alav Ad Sheyitkaven Lo Rabbanan Amri Debei Rabbi Yanai Prat Zorech Evan Lego.
Okay. So my tama the Rabbi Shimon.
Okay, so what's the reason for Rabbi Shimon's opinion? The verse says, and if he ambushes him and he comes onto him,
Right, that goes up. I like, kama love. All right. Okay. Literally, like he stands up against him.
he
Right?
stands up against him until he intends for him. And the rabbis say that from the Beit Rabbi Yanai, the house of Rabbi Yanai, the study, the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Yanai, to exclude one that throws a stone at his back.
So no, so the go means like toch, and again, this is a very truncated statement. This is excludes somebody who throws a stone into the middle or into the midst of a
We talked
group
about
of
that last week.
people.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So Rabbi Shimon bases himself on this pasuk in Dvarim, which I had opened and I guess I closed it. So let's just open it again. Oh no, that's where it is. I knew I had it somewhere. Okay. A few too many things open. Okay, so this is pasuk in in Dvarim, right? V'chi ya'ish sonei l're'eu v'arav lo v'kam alav v'hikahu nefesh v'meit v'nas el achat ha'arimaya. So this is one of the places where we talk about Arei Miklat, and this is laying out the conditions for someone who kills somebody else uh, to be qualified, I guess, is to be a person who can be accepted into a near miklat. So what's the case? Somebody hates his neighbor, hates his friend. But arav lo, see what they say for to lie in wait, right? To lie in wait. He was lying in wait for him to ambush him. The kamalav and hikahu nefesh. He gave him a deadly blow and he died. Then Vinas el Chatarimaya. Then he'll flee to one of these cities. Oof. Yeah. Right. But if any man hates his neighbor and lies in wait for him and rises up against him and strikes him mortally so that he dies and he flees into one of these cities. I'm not sure if I would put an and on flees, but that's a technical thing. Okay, so what is Rabbi Shimon? How is Rabbi Shimon understanding this? So Rabbi Shimon, what's the reason for Rabbi Shimon? So Rabbi Shimon is the one who holds that in order to be chayav mitah for killing a fellow Jew, you have to have specific intent to kill that particular person. And he learns it from here. Va'arav lo v'kamalav, ad kavein lo, till he has intent for him. So how does he learn it from here? What is it? What's in the pasuk that indicates this to him?
That if those conditions are met, that he uh, waits for him and stands up against him, then he is liable. He's not allowed to go into the Ir Miklat. So therefore, the opposite, where he um, doesn't plan to kill him, doesn't hate him, doesn't plan to kill him, then he would be patur.
Yeah, basically you can say something like that. We could say that the words themselves, va'aravlo, he lies in wait for him. Maybe that's extra, right? Because if I take them out, what would the pasuk be? The pasuk would be, right? A person hates his friend, and then he rises up against him and kills him. That should seem to be enough. So what do I get
Right.
from va'aravlo? The va'aravlo seems to indicate, Rabbi Shimon says, that tells me that he's lying in wait for him, for that specific person. And that's the basis for what he's saying. So if he ends up killing somebody else, not unintentionally, then he's patur. So in that case, now we have a question about the Rabbanah. So let's say that seems to be a pretty good proof. It doesn't seem to be a stretch at all from the plain understanding of the pasuk that you have to have intent to kill that specific person. So how do the Rabbanan understand? How does the Tanakama understand that pasuk? So Rabbanan Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai, the Rabbanan say, and then from the we get the opinion of the Rabbanan from those who said in the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Yanai, this pasuk excludes the case of someone who throws a stone into the midst of a group of people. So, what does that mean? What does that mean? Just a second. Um, let's look at Rashi here for a second. Ami debe Rabbi Yanai prat lazorek even lagal v'toch chavura shel bnei adam putim v'Yisraelim. So what is it talking about? It's talking about a case where somebody threw a rock into a mixed group of people who were both Jews and non-Jews. So what it tells me is that the Arava, the Kamla, that tells me that that would exclude the case of just throwing a rock or throwing some kind of killing device into a group of people kind of anonymously, and it ends up killing somebody. Because why? Because it sounds like the pasuk seems to indicate you have to have more specificity than that. Avonit kaven Yisrael ze v'harag et chaveiro lo atakra limute. The pasuk doesn't exclude the case of if you had kavanah to kill a Jew and you killed another Jew. In other words, according to the Rabbanan, it only excludes the case of where someone, it excludes the case where someone killed somebody in a mixed group and he didn't know if he was going to kill a Jew or kill a non-Jew. In other words, it's even more removed than it's even more removed than the case of what's the case of the Chachamim from the Mishnah that we derive from the Mishnah. If you had intent to kill Reuven and you killed Shimon, you would be chayav. But here, it's even another step removed from that because your intent is maybe to kill somebody who's in that group, but the group itself is mixed. You don't even know if you're going to kill a Jew or a non-Jew. So that's what the pasuk excludes, but it would still not exclude a case of where you intended to kill this person and you ended up killing this Jew and you ended up killing another Jew.
Okay.
Okay. So now, one second, I might be able to. Oh, it's okay. Let's read it from here and then we'll see. So this part here, we essentially see the next part that we're going to read. We essentially see repeated in our Gemara and Yoma. But let's read it here. Hey Chidami.
Hechidami uleme de echad tesha goyim v'chad Yisrael minehen tipok le deruba goyim ninuhu inami palga upalga sefek nafashot lahakel.
Okay, so what does all that mean?
So what are the circumstances? If you say that it is 10 non-Jews and one Jew among them,
Or
and
nine, let's say nine
nine.
non-Jews.
I'm sorry, nine non-Jews and one Jew among them. You take out one of them.
So tipukle literally means what you're saying is a little translation.
Yeah.
Tipu clay, but it means that it means you can answer it, or you could explain that situation by saying Duruba goyim. In other words, I could answer it up by saying most of them are goyim. We'll fill that out a little bit more in a minute. Duruba goyim nidhu. Most of them are goyim. Inami.
Alternatively, half and half, then Sefek Nefashot, the Hakel, we rule leniently in the case of Sefek Nefashot.
Okay, and what would it mean in this case to rule leniently?
Um, since there was an equal chance of killing both a Jew and a non-Jew, if someone threw a rock into that group, then we don't that the person who threw and he killed the Jew, the person would be patur.
He would still be patur, right? We would be mekil. Okay, so the Gemara is trying to understand what are the circumstances of this prat zorek even lago. We already see Rashi anticipated what the Gemara is going to say by saying it's talking about a case of a group of people, of Jews and non-Jews. But Rashi didn't go into to the way that group might be, and the Gemara is going to go into it. The Gemara says, so what does it mean? Like as you say, what are the circumstances of this person who's throwing a rock into a group of people? So if you say it's a group where 9 of the people are goyim and only one is Yisrael amongst them, so tipukle duruba goyim. So then I could answer it, meaning I don't need a special pasuk to tell me that he'll be patur, because most of them are goyim, and I'm going to go after the rov. So I don't need a pasuk for that. So that can't be what the Chachamim meant when they said "Ba'aravlo v'kamlo is pratla zorek even lago." Inami. So let's give another example that it maybe they're talking about. What if it's half and half Jews and half non-Jews? So there also I don't need a pasuk to tell me that he'd be patur, because safek nefashot lahakel. It's 50-50. It's a safek shakul whether he's going to kill a Jew or a non-Jew. And so even if he kills a Jew, but safek nefashot lahakel. So let's read this last part. Lo tzricha.
Lo tzricha deicha detesha Yisrael v'goy echad b'neihen dahavin le goy kavua v'kol kavua mechetza al mechetza dame.
Okay, so let's stop with that. So
Okay.
lo tzricha.
Uh, Lo tzricha or lo tzricha? We don't need.
So the way I
Oh,
usually
okay.
I translate, it's interesting because I see I think Steinsaltz says this differently. The way I read this, I think it's easy to read. It's lo, comma, tzricha.
Okay.
No, I still need it. In other words, I
Okay.
still
That's yeah.
need that pasuk. That
Yeah.
what?
For the case of where there are 9 Jews and one non-Jew among them, and that there is the goy is kavua. Oh, we talked about this last week. Kavua, and anything that's kavua is like half 50-50.
It's like 50-50. In other words, what I'm going to end up learning from this pasuk of Aravlo, I'm going to learn this principle of kol kavua kemechtal mechtadan. This is going to be the basis from the pasuk, from the Torah, to give me this general rule. Kol kavua kemechtal mechtadan. So I need it for the case of when there's 9 Jews and there's one goy, because in that case I would have thought what?
Since the majority are Jews, that he would be chayev if he killed a Jew.
And so what the pasuk tells me, it's prat zorek even lago, it excludes this case where there were 9 Jews and one goy, because what will I say? The goy is kavua, the whole kavua kemechtzal mechtzadam. And so now what does that mean? So we talked a little bit about that
Yeah.
last time. Just a second. Yeah, I think we're gonna leave this. I think we're gonna leave the Gemara here and go back to our Gemara. So as we're coming back to our Gemara, so you understand what we did now, I just wanted to introduce you to some of the basis for this idea. I don't expect that we have fully fleshed it out, right? So it's something that might still take a little bit more discussion. But let's see how this becomes relevant in our sugya. And then as we're doing it in our sugya, we'll examine that last part a little bit more. Um, so before we go into this part, I just want to say, we had 45 minutes of learning, and this is what I was thinking. Originally, I thought we might have. I always, overly optimistic. I wanted to get to the end of this sugya this week, down to here, because I think for the next couple of weeks, I wanted to switch because we're in Yoma. I wanted to switch to a later part of Yoma that deals directly with tshuva, and that's what we're going to do next week. So I think what we're going to do today, because we're not going to really finish it, and I don't want to simply rush through it, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read now from here till the end of the sugya, give like a rough understanding, and then probably after the Chagim, we will return to this sugya here. And I think I'm going to make a little note just because. Okay. So I'm going to just read for a little bit and then we'll finish for today. So Marav Yosef, Amarav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lo halchu b'pikuach nefesh achar hara. Okay, so in Pikuach Nefesh, they, with Chachamim, didn't go after the majority. Hechidam. So what does that mean? What are the circumstances? I name adika tisha Yisrael v'goy echad beinayu ruba Yisrael. So if you say we're talking about a case where there are 9 Jews and one goy, so most of them are Jews, right? And Rashi says, and see, just to remind us, in our case here, we're not talking about murder. We're talking about, do we save somebody on Shabbos or Yom Kippur, right? So Rashi says, "Inema tisha Yisrael v'chad nachri v'nafla mapolet al echad mehen." An avalanche falls on one of them. Vein yadua im Yisrael im nachrihu. I don't know if he's a Jew or a goy. Then what would I do? Would I start to dig him out on Yom Kippur or on Shabbos? Okay, Ruba Yisrael knew. Most of them are Jews. So I would go at so there, obviously I will go after the Rov. So that's not the case that Shmuel is talking about when he said Lo halchu b'pikuach nefesh achar harov. Palga safek nefashot lahakel. So if there's half and half, if half the people were Jews and half the people were non-Jews, then a mapolet fell on one of them, and I don't know which one. I would also start digging him out because half and half, safek nefashot lahakel. If I need to save somebody's life, I'll be mekil. So here I'll be mekil on Shabbos to start digging for them. Rather, eladika tisha goyim Yisrael echad. Rather, it must be talking about a case where there was a group of people, nine of them were non-Jews. One of them was a Jew, and Mapolet fell on one of them, and now I don't know which one. So that should be the case that Shmuel's talking about. That even though the rove is non-Jews, I would still dig them out on Shabbos. But the Gemara pushes back and says, Hanami Pshita. No, that would also be obvious, meaning I don't need Shmuel because I know I'm not going to go after the rove here. Why? The Havale Kavua. The whole Kavua, Kemechtzal Mechtzadami. Because in this case, we're talking about this group of people. They were Kavua, they were in a fixed place, presumably when the Mapolet fell. And now, and maybe after that, they scattered. The whole kavua kemechtzal mechtadami. So it's a 50-50 chance that the person who's there is Jewish, right? It's 50% that he might be Jewish, 50% he might not be Jewish. So that also can't be the case that Shmuel's talking about. So the Gemara says, Lo, tzricha. No, I still need Shmuel's statement, because what would be the case? The parush le chatzer acheret. It's talking about a case where there were 10 people. 9 of them were goyim. One of them was a Jew. But one of them separated himself and went to a different chatzer. And there's where the mapolet happened. Right? Bo tzricha de parush chatzer acheret v'sham nafla echad mapolet. And that's where the avalanche fell. The bechol duchta amrinan kol the parish meruba parish. The mide denaidi. I'll come back to this Rashi in a second. Let's just read it here in the Gemara. So mahu detema. So what would you have thought? What would you say? Kol the parish meruba parish. Anything that separates becomes separated from a group. We assume it's like a statistical assumption. We assume that he comes from the majority of the group. Kamash malan. So this case will come to teach us, like Shmuel was saying, that in this case we don't use the rove. We don't apply this principle of rove when it comes to pikuach nefesh. So just to explain the case again a little bit, so you had 10 people who were standing in a chatzer. 9 of them are goyim, one of them is a Jew. One of them moves away, goes to a different chatzer, and a polet falls on them. So now I've gone from a case where we had kavua, everyone was fixed in a particular place, but now that one has separated himself, it goes to this other general rule that called the parish meruba the parish. So now I have to say that whoever went into the other chatzer, my assumption is going to be they came from the rove. And so since the rove was goyim, I should say I shouldn't dig him out on Shabbos. Kamash malan delo hachu b'pikuch nefesh acharo. This would be a case where I would say no. In other words, even if there's only, now what would I say? There's only really a 1 in 10 chance that the person under there is a Jew. But nonetheless, I will be Machal Shabbos to try to save his life. The Gemara says, Ini, is that so? V'hamar Rabbi Yasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Tisha Goyim, Yisrael Echad. What if you had 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew? B'otah chatzer, mifakhin. B'chatzer acheret, ein mifakhin. If it's in that same courtyard, then we'll dig for them, right? And if it's in another chatzer, we don't dig for them. So I have a statement from Rabbi Yochanan that seems to contradict what I just my the conclusion I just came to. My conclusion was if they're all in the same chatzer, and then a mapolet falls in them. So what did I say? Kol kavua kemechza mechza dami, and I would dig. And if one of them would remove themselves, I would also dig because b'pikuach nefesh lo chinacharo. But here Rabbi Yochanan says, "Potach chatzer mefaklin, b'chatzer acheret ein mefaklin," which it seems to imply if one of them had separated themselves and then the mapolet fell, I wouldn't be mefakech. So I don't go after. I do go after the rove, and nonetheless, it's and none even though it's a case of pikuach nefesh, I would go after the rove, and I wouldn't uncover him. I wouldn't try to dig him out. So lo kasha, there isn't really a contradiction between what Rabbi Yochanan is saying and the way we concluded with Shmuel. The had the parish kulhu had the parish miktasai, because one is talking about a case where all of them left, and one is a case where only some of them left. There was the way we defined Shmuel's case is if one of them left.
Right.
But if all of them left, so had the parish kulhu ho'il v'yitchazek Yisrael b'hai chatzer shenafla ba'am bo mapolet mifakli. Since we have a chazaka that the Israel is in, since all of them left and they went to another chatzer, so there is a chazaka that there's still a Jew in that group. So if a mapolet falls on one of them, then I go and I dig it out. V'afalgav denaidi, even though they moved, they're no longer kavua. Lo azlin and bataruba. I don't go after the rove.
Oh, okay.
But if only some of them move, then what? V'lo yadinan ihavi Yisrael b'hai chatzer. And I don't know now if only some of them moved, if and then a mapolet fell on one of them. I don't know if it's a Jew or not. Azlin and bataruba. So there, I would say to go after the rove. Hawil v'lo chazek, because there isn't a chazaka now that there's a Jew in the other chatzer. Or it's if all of them move, then I know that there's a Jew in the other chatzer. But if only some of them move, now I don't know. So then the Gemara says, "Umiyamar Shmuel." So that seems to clear up the contradiction between what we understood Shmuel to say and what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Umiyamar Shmuel hachi. Did Shmuel really say that? V'hatinan. We have in a Mishnah, Matzaba Tinok Mushlach, Imrov Goyim Goy, Imrov Yisrael Yisrael, Mechza Mechza Yisrael. If you find a Tinok, if you find a kid who's thrown out, in other words, a kid who's like just out on the street. Rashi says, Mishnah hi Beseder Taharot, it's in Masechet Machshirin, the Irshi Yisrael, the Nachrim Darim Ba. It's a city where both Jews and non-Jews live. And what it means is you find an anonymous child on the street. So what is he? Is he a Jew? Is he not a Jew? How do we treat him? Uh, uh, Not, I mean, we can treat him humanely, but in other words, how do we think that he's a Jew, and so we're going to conduct ourselves with him as if he's a Jew, or do we think he's a non-Jew? So Imrov Goyim, if most of the people in that city are Goyim, we consider him to be a Goy. If most of the people in the city are a Jew, we consider him to be a Jew. Mechta Mechta, and if it's half and half, then we consider him to be a Jew. Ve'amar Rav, so Rav said, Lo shanu ela hachyoto. So we only learn this Mishnah in regards to whether we need to keep him alive or not. Aval yachso lo, but to give him yichus, in other words, to consider him to be Jewish for all intents and purposes, no, that's not what the Mishnah is telling me. Rashi explains, Lo shanadim rov Yisrael mechavkinan leil Yisrael el lahachyoto. We didn't learn it that in a case where it's mostly a city of mostly Jews, that we hold him to be a Jew only for the purpose of keeping him alive. Aval yachso could go. For example, what would it mean? Like, what would be the practical application of giving him a yichus, of considering him to be a Jew? For example, if it was a girl, she kohen mutarba. If she's a girl, is a kohen allowed to marry her? Lo. So not so on that Rav says no. We don't consider this. We wouldn't consider this girl to be Jewish ad kedei kach to say that a kohen could marry her. But feel leka the mechash la sufi kigon hanaf damri masech kidushi. Okay, that gets a little more technical, and I'll leave that for when we go through the later. So that's what Rav says on this Mishnah. Shmuel Amar l'fakeach alav et hagal. For what purpose do we consider this anonymous child that we find in the street to be a Jew? L'fakeach alav et hagal. Specifically, to tell me that if I see an avalanche that fell on them on Shabbos, that I would dig them out. In other words, I would consider them Jewish enough, as it were, that I would be Machal Shabbos to save their life. So that seems to go against our understanding of Shmuel from before, because Shmuel from before, I might say, wouldn't say such a thing. Ki itmar de Shmuel aresha itmar imrov goyim goy. So when Shmuel said this latter thing, Mefakech alav et hagal, he was saying, imrov goyim goy. When the Mishnah says if most of the people are goyim, then he's a goy, and on that Shmuel was saying, "L'inyan pikuach nefesh ein okay." In other words, Shmuel says, "Pikuach nefesh lo hochim achar harov." That was his original statement. And now I have this Mishnah where,
okay.
right, where it says it ends up with this case, Mechtal Imrov Yisrael, Mechtal Mechtal Yisrael, and then but if Rov Goyim Goy, right?
So he goes after the majority in this case.
So right. So when in that case, Imrov Goyim Goy, Amar Shmuel, he's applying the same principle. In other words, Matzah batinok mushlach imrov goyim goy, and Shmuel says, but not for pikuach nefesh. So it actually fits into the same understanding of Shmuel that we had before. It also applies here. Okay, let's stop here. It's a lot to take in. And I think it's going to take us more than one shear to get through this properly. But I think this was a good, solid beginning. And if you have the time and inclination, try to go over this yourself, right? Go over it yourself. But Beli Neder, before next Wednesday, I'll send out some sheets from later in the chapter, and we'll focus a little bit more on Shuvah for the next couple of weeks. I just heard a podcast last night. I don't know if you ever listened to the 1840 podcast.
Yeah, I was listening today, but I'm way behind.
I don't listen to. I don't like. Yeah, I know. I gave up trying to listen to. Also, not all of them are as compelling to me. I think he's very good.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much.
The most recent one is an interview with this woman, Ebner, who translated. She did translation of Rav Kook from various sources, and so they talk a lot about Rav Kook and why she chose to translate this. It's a very good interview. She's a fascinating person. But it motivated me to try to. I've picked up Orot HaTshuva of Rav Kook a couple of times. I never really got into it. I have it on the Bar Ilan project. I have just the straight text, and I sat down after this and I started to read through it. And it is really fascinating. I think also I'm in a better place to try to grasp it more. But I really, if you listen, you'll see. I really like the way she speaks about it. Speaks
I
about
will.
Rav Kook's concept of tshuva. So, matim lanu, right, to
Yeah, yeah,
focus
yeah.
a little bit on tshuva. So we'll do that next week. Okay. Thank you for
All right,
showing
thank
up.
you. Yeah, a little bit of trouble, but yeah,
Right,
it's important.
technical issues.
Yeah,
Well,
and missiles.
okay.
All
Have
right.
a bye bye. I'll see you
All
next
right,
week.
thanks. Good night. Thank you very much. Good night.